A lot of people don't know trans people, and so it's much easier to stereotype, especially when they're being told all of these lies about trans people. Because quite frankly, I've never been scared of trans people. I've been scared of a lot of cis straight men.
I'm Brian Henderson, Executive Director of the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists, or AWAB. Our mission is to create and support a community of churches, organizations, and individuals committed to the inclusion of LGBTQ plus persons in the full life and mission of the Baptist landscape. In this first season of the AWAB podcast, Voice of the Turtle, we're going to dig into the past while we face the present. The year 2026 brings some uncertainty for our LGBTQ plus siblings and allies. But we've been here before. Across 8 episodes, we're going to burrow our way through some of our history and talk to the people who made it and are still making it. In this episode, you'll hear from Dr. Susan Shaw, Professor Emerita at Oregon State University. Dr. Shaw taught in women, gender, and sexuality studies for more than 30 years. She is the co-author of Feminist Theologies, The Basics, written with Dr. Grace Ji-sun Kim, their third book together along with Surviving God and Intersectional Theologies. In our conversation, we revisit a lecture she delivered 2 years ago as part of AWAB's annual lecture series and explore a range of insights that I suspect may continue to resonate with many of us today. In Finding a Home Among Baptists, Delane too tells the story of the welcoming and affirming movement in Baptist life, weaving it into the broader history of LGBTQ plus people in the United States. She takes us back to the post-World War II era, when executive orders under Harry S. Truman and Dwight D. Eisenhower led to the removal of so-called homosexuals from government jobs. She recalls police raids on gay bars and cruising areas and lifts up early figures like Frank Kameny, Bayard Rustin, Harry Hay, Phyllis Lyon, and Del Martin, voices that helped spark a movement growing across the country, from early gay power groups to the uprising at Stonewall. And when I think about Stonewall, I think of Marsha P. Johnson. You know her, right? Some called her the Saint of Christopher Street. A central figure in LGBTQ and transgender activism, she lived boldly and died far too young in 1992 at just 46. The P in her name, you may ask? Pay it no mind. A phrase that captured both her defiance of societal expectations and her resilience in the face of harassment and violence. Marsha once said, "History isn't something you look back at and say it was inevitable. It happens because people make decisions, sometimes impulsive, in the moment. But those moments add up." And that's where we're headed today. We're talking with someone who understands those decisions and how those moments add up. Someone who knows when to pay it no mind and when to listen deeply to both mind and heart. I'm honored to welcome Susan Shaw. Someone said, "Sometimes there's more spirit in a pint than there is in a pew." Would you believe the story of AWAB, or the welcoming and affirming movement in Baptist life, traces its roots to a bar in Lincoln, Nebraska? This story, and many more, are told in AWAB's history written by Delane Tu, Finding a Home Among Baptists. You can order your own copy of this history at awab.org/book. That is awab.org/book. This book and its rich retelling of how many Baptists are welcoming and affirming provides the basis for this current Voice of the Turtle podcast series, digging into the past while facing the present. Again, you can order your copy of Finding a Home Among Baptists at awab.org/book. History, including AWAB's history, moves through people, through choices, through courage, through moments that don't always feel significant at the time, but somehow change everything. And if you follow those moments, if you trace them through movements, through communities, through the life of the church, you begin to see how they shape not only public witness, but personal faith. How questions of justice, identity, and belonging don't sit at the margins, but press right up against the heart of what it means to live truthfully and faithfully. That kind of work, paying attention to those moments, asking hard questions, refusing easy answers, that's the work of scholars and of people willing to stay in the conversation even when it's uncomfortable. And it's exactly the kind of work our guest today has spent her life doing. We welcome Dr. Susan Shaw. As mentioned, Susan taught for over 30 years at Oregon State University. Before that, she taught religious studies at 2 private Christian liberal arts colleges. At OSU, she taught the scope of the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies curriculum, but focused on courses on feminism and the Bible and feminist theologies. For many years, Dr. Shaw did public scholarship for various outlets, ranging from Huffington Post and Baptist News Global to Ms. Magazine and Forbes Sports Money. Her newest and final book is forthcoming with Princeton University Press. It's on how to retire for academics. Travel is her passion, and the only thing she's continuing to do from her former life is a 2-week summer study abroad in London. She's learning to do mosaic tile, and she's spending more time gardening now that she doesn't have meetings, graduate committees, class preps, and grading. Susan, we're really glad you've taken time to join us today on The Voice of the Turtle.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, wonderful. We are so glad you are. And we know that you are no stranger to AWAB. In 2023, you were AWAB's annual lecturer, where you lectured on truths and lies at the foot of the cross. And it was wonderful to be together as we were in Dallas, Texas, at none other than Wilshire Baptist Church. Can you share how you've known of AWAB over the years, and maybe even share perhaps some of your Baptist roots?
Well, let me start with the second part first. I'm one of those creatures who was, born into a Southern Baptist church on the cradle-roll. Some of you are old enough to remember that term. And so I grew up Southern Baptist. Thought I'd spend my life serving Southern Baptist, but they uh,
Hmm.
changed.
Well,
And so I fled and lived in exile
mm,
for most of my adult life. Within that, I kind of stuck with Southern Baptists through the early years of the controversy between fundamentalists and moderates.
mm,
And then in 1992, you'll recall that the Southern Baptist Convention took the first vote to amend its constitution to exclude churches that in any way implied acceptance of homosexuality, to use their
mm,
term. And then, of course, in 93 is when they took the second vote. And so that became officially part of who Southern Baptists were. That was also the summer that I was ordained
mm.
as a Southern Baptist in a Southern Baptist church in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh my.
And I stuck it out for a couple more years, but then I could not continue to do that. Because I could not be part of a denomination that now excluded a certain group of people, I was bothered by the fact that they had set up any theological criterion for the first time in the history of the convention.
Mm,
And I knew that if I was going to a church that was still part of the Southern Baptist Convention, we hadn't done enough to get kicked out yet. And that was also troubling.
mm,
And in the Northwest, that wasn't going to happen because there were too many state employees, state Baptist employees who went to that church. And so they had to kind of walk that fine line.
mm-hmm,
And so at that point, I was also coming out myself, and so decided in 1995 to leave the SBC and wandered around for a while and ended up in the UCC. So it was also about that time that the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists was being founded. But I was in the Northwest, and there certainly were no, well, there weren't really any cooperative Baptist fellowship churches, much less alliance
sure.
churches. And so I left and joined the UCC. So I hadn't heard that there was a group that was forming that
Mm,
was specifically trying to address this issue.
mm,
And so I don't remember when I first heard about the association, but I was so excited when I did because even though I had left, my identity was still Baptist. I mean, what I always
sure.
told people through the years was that I was a Baptist in exile in the UCC.
Mm-hmm,
And so I was really excited to know that this was there, even though it was geographically too far away for me to have much of a connection.
mm,
And like I said, by that point, I had joined the UCC. And so when you all came knocking for me to get to speak, I was so
Yeah.
excited
Oh,
because I
good.
felt like these were
We
my
were too.
people. I mean, I love
Mm,
the UCC, but Baptists are my people in a different kind of
hmm
way. So it was exciting to come back and be part of that. And I'm so
mm,
grateful for the work that the association did and continues to do.
wonderful, wonderful. You can take someone out of a Baptist church, but you can't take a Baptist out of a Baptist, right? Oh my
Exactly.
goodness. Oh wow. Good. Well, and you are not in exile with AWAB. That is for sure. Thinking of your time, Susan, with us in Dallas and your lecture on truths and lies at the foot of the cross, which can still be heard in its entirety on AWAB's website. You shared how we've all heard how everyone's equal at the foot of the cross, except oftentimes LGBTQ plus folk like ourselves. Can you expand on this a bit more? And is there anything you might add today to what you lectured on then, with all that we've been facing of late religiously and politically?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize both the long history and the contemporary mistreatment of LGBTQ people in the Baptist tradition. And, one of the things that was always so painful for me, even from afar, was
Mm,
how the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship struggled with this issue
sure.
and could not find a way to make that place for LGBTQ people to be truly equal.
Hmm
The Alliance did that from the beginning, and I was excited. Had there been an Alliance church in the Northwest, I'd have stayed
hmm
with it, but since I didn't have access to that, I couldn't. And I think that not only has that mistreatment continued, it's escalated. And of course, that's greatly related to the current political situation. And so we've seen some things happen. For example, the support for marriage equality has fallen off.
hmm
Support, in fact, for LGBTQ people generally has fallen off,
Yeah.
partly because it has now become a partisan issue.
hmm
So at the moment when we finally got marriage equality, there was support across the board among Democrats and Republicans. Um, uh, there was movement even among conservative Christians
mm
to find these ways to make room for LGBTQ people in some really new ways.
hmm
And then with this moment we have with Trump and sort of what I consider the merging of the Republican Party and evangelical Christianity, which I don't see a difference between those things anymore. And again, LGBTQ issues became partisan. And
Yeah.
so it was no longer okay to support marriage equality. And of course, the people who faced the brunt of that were trans folks. I think again that queer folk had made enough progress and enough people knew enough of us that that's a little harder to backslide on. I mean, it's happening, but
hmm
not at the pace at which trans rights are being eroded. And I think that's because a lot of people don't know trans people.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so it's much easier to stereotype, especially when they're being told all of these lies about trans people.
Yeah.
Because quite frankly, I've never been scared of trans people. I've been scared of a lot of cis straight men.
Point well made.
Like the sort of targeting of drag story hour. It's not drag queens who are child abusers. Uh,
Hmm
and I think part of the reason that this happens is the link to gender itself.
hmm
This is about preserving white patriarchy.
mm
And so to do that, we have to put women in their place, we have to put people of color in their place, and we have to put LGBTQ people in their place, particularly right now, trans people, because of their challenge to the whole notion of gender and the
Yeah.
gender binary, because patriarchy rests on that. You can't
hmm
oppress one group of people without defining them clearly in opposition to the group in power.
Yeah.
And so I think that we've just seen an escalation in that. And a good example, I think, of how we've seen escalations in that sort of general war against women, against LGBTQ people, against people of color is, we see these things happening. I don't know if you saw on CNN the story that broke about the online rape academy and the numbers of
Yeah.
people visiting those sites, or you think about the
Mm.
woman in France whose, you know, husband drugged her and had other men rape her. it's like, the truth is that's where the fear belongs, but it's so much
Mhm.
easier to distract us by saying, oh, be afraid of trans people who are, claim to be trans women are really men who are going to hang out in women's bathrooms and endanger them. It's like, no, that is not the danger in women's bathrooms, as we know.
Yeah.
And so I think that paying attention to those intersections is really important
Mhm.
because it isn't just about LGBTQ, but it's also about these, and it's tied up in whiteness as well.
Right.
And I just want to reiterate that this
Mhm.
is about patriarchy, but it's specifically about white patriarchy. And I, I think that continues to increase. I mean, we just saw, for example, the courts have said it's okay to reinstitute conversion therapies. States can't regulate that. What I wonder is now if they're going to tell all those organizations they can no longer say you can't talk about abortion because that's also a matter of free speech. We're kind of waiting on that
Now you're preaching. You're preaching.
one. Yeah. Uh, and I think part of what this has escalated, and I thank my co-author Grace Ji Sun Kim for this term.
Sure.
It's a Korean term, and it's called Han. And Han is the word that describes the suffering that comes as a result of unresolved injustice.
Mm.
And I think we are seeing the experience of Han, particularly among LGBTQ people right now, because they are experiencing so great an injustice and a mistreatment and oppression, and there is not resolution. And I don't see it in the near future as long as this administration is in power, and as long as the hearts of so many Americans in general, Baptist and other Christians in
Hmm.
particular,
Hmm.
is hardened toward LGBTQ people. So that was a long answer to your
No,
question.
that's a really good answer. Your wisdom continues to offer us so much. So thank you, Susan. Yeah. Along the lines though of white patriarchy and all the realities that come with white Christian nationalism, even as Oregon and particularly Portland leads the way for being a safer place for LGBTQ plus folk today and our trans and non-binary siblings, how are you experiencing or witnessing these realities today?
I mean, out here, we just laugh at the idea that Portland's a war zone. I mean, that's the most
Mm.
ridiculous thing I've ever heard. We are doing well in Oregon. I am glad I'm an Oregonian right now.
Mm-hmm.
I want to invite all those people from those places that are harming them to, come on
Mm.
to Oregon because for the moment it's safe. But we know, I mean, our freedoms are never guaranteed, and so we have to
Mm-hmm.
be vigilant even in places like Oregon, California,
Yeah,
Washington. We can't assume that the rights we have now are always the rights
right.
that we'll have. I mean, there are forces here at work. I mean, goodness, this has been a homeland for white supremacy for decades and decades. So those things sort of exist side by side in tension here. Probably the symbol that most aptly describes all of this in Portland, of course, is our beloved inflatable frog.
Yeah, yes.
Uh, that's so important. I mean, we have a slogan, keep Portland weird. And
Mm.
the frog just sort of sums it up. And I think that's a powerful tool, the use of humor. So instead of letting this administration goad people into violence,
Mm.
we respond with humor and with mocking. And people go and they sing outside the ICE facility. And there is very little violence that has happened on the part of protesters. Now, I won't say
Mm.
that's true on the
Sure.
part of the sort of governmental machine around all of that.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, things are good in Portland. I just wish that this administration would leave us alone.
Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah.
don't we all? Don't we all? And I am glad that Portland, Oregon has the frog. And I was with a group of folk yesterday speaking, and I said, in these times, as difficult as they are, we have to have some humor. We've got to be able to laugh to help us balance the weight of reality that we are experiencing seemingly almost every day. Yeah, and these are hard times, and they're going to continue to be hard times, I suspect. We'll be right back with more of our conversation with Dr. Susan Shaw. AWAB proudly welcomes American Baptist Home Mission Societies as a sponsor of this inaugural season of Voice of the Turtle podcast. For nearly 200 years, ABHMS has promoted the Christian faith to impact lives positively, inspired by the gospel that heals and transforms, ABHMS cultivates and empowers faith leaders across the U.S. and Puerto Rico. ABHMS partners with American Baptists and others to build networks, foster innovation in ministry, and deliver high-quality resources to educate and equip those who are passionate about healing and transforming the communities they serve. To learn more, visit the ABHMS website at abhms.org. Thank you, ABHMS, for your support. AWAB also proudly welcomes Knollwood Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, as a sponsor for this inaugural season. A generous grant from Knollwood's Missions Affiliations and Allocations Committee brings Voice of the Turtle to you today. Now, back to our conversation with Dr. Shaw. From your work academically, how would you encourage individuals and communities to remain hopeful and committed, even to diversity, equity, and inclusion in this season?
Yeah, this is a hard one because I will be honest with you that the 2024 election pretty well broke me.
Yeah.
When I saw that every denomination, except for the Episcopalians, voted for Trump, I had a moment where I realized, and with them, it was only 54% that voted the other way, where I realized I think that the church is an institution broken beyond repair
Mm.
because it obviously has not transformed people who
Mm-hmm.
could vote for this kind of cruelty, not against just LGBTQ people, but against immigrants,
Mm-hmm.
against disabled people, against, I mean, anyone who is vulnerable. And that sent me into a spiral for a while. I mean, I was in a level of despair
Mm.
I'd never been in
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And I began to think a lot about what's going to make a difference. Where is there hope?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I don't see it in the church as an institution. Now, yeah, I have to confess, I'm a product of a professor at Southern Seminary named Finley Edge. And
Mm.
Finley Edge, one of the things he taught was how good ideas become embodied in institutions. So he says there's a group and they have a good idea and it's something great and they want to sustain it. And as they do, they begin to create structures around it. And
Mm.
those structures eventually become an institution.
Mm.
At some point, those people who had the great idea die out, and other people who were further removed from the good idea inherit the institution. And then eventually, the task, the mission becomes preserving the institution itself
Right.
rather than embodying the vision that led to the founding of the institution. And I think the church probably hit that a couple thousand years ago,
Well,
but
I was going to say, I think the church has been doing that for a couple thousand years.
you know, this made it incredibly clear to
Mm-hmm.
me that we need something else
Yeah.
because obviously this has not worked. I mean, how people could claim to know Jesus and support the levels of cruelty that we have seen in the
Mm.
past few years is beyond me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not terribly hopeful. Where I have hope, though,
Good.
is young, queer, non-binary, and trans people
Mm.
because they're going to blow up gender and they're going to free us all. And
Mm.
I think that's where the hope comes from is that these kids who have energy, I mean, I'm old and retired now, I'm a little less energetic than I used to be, but they have that and they got to come of age in a moment
Mm-hmm.
when there was more flexibility there to be things that we never could have dreamed. And I'm, like way older than you, that I never ever could have dreamed about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think their refusal to buy into norms of gender and a gender binary and defined sexualities
Mm-hmm.
has the potential to free us all up. If we can just destroy gender, destroy the notion of fixed sexual identities, then we're all free to
Mm.
be who we are, to figure that out, to be somebody else. And that gives me great hope.
Mm.
And of course, that has to move beyond just the individual into the social and political sphere so that our social institutions then support that kind of freedom. And we're seeing this backlash, right? So when you're telling schools, don't say gay. And I will tell you, I grew up in the 1960s in a Southern Baptist church in Rome, Georgia. Nobody said gay to me, but look how I turned out. I mean, honestly.
Right.
Um,
Oh.
And it's this sort of symbolic attack,
Hmm.
because it's not that people, you don't turn people gay, but if we could attack that, we could say that there is something fundamentally wrong with being gay, and so we have to purge it in every way possible. And I tell you what, all that stuff is going to lead to is the more deaths of queer, trans, non-binary kids. And that's going to be on the conscience in the hands of the church as
Hmm.
well, I think. But I think that those kids make me hopeful. And
Wow.
the resistance movements make me
Hmm.
hopeful
Hmm.
because, we have to organize, we have to fight, we have to advocate for change, and we have to support one another, build alliances, and build coalitions so that we're working together. So every time I go to one of the, No Kings protests, I
Right.
mean, I feel encouraged, I feel hopeful because I see people there who are trying to make a difference. So I think it's there. I just think it's not in the institutions who would be the usual suspects. I think they're part of the problem.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, those events are offering us hope, aren't they? You've just offered me hope to know that when I am spiraling into despair, I'm not alone. And I think the reality is we all need to know that this is a reality that many of us are facing and living with, right? We spiral into despair, and then I don't know how it is for you, Susan. It sounds like it. For me, there are moments when I think, okay, someone says something, I see someone being courageous, I have a sense of my perspective has shifted, and I think, you know what, okay, we're good. We're going to make this. We're going to do this. And then a few days pass, and I feel like I spiral into despair again. So, but in the midst of your sharing, you also shared, or at least used the word retired or retirement. And I know you haven't quite spiraled into retirement. You've transitioned or moved into retirement. So, after spending a career of teaching and publishing, lecturing, researching, and now you're beginning to explore a different rhythm of life, it sounds like. Some like to say rewirement, different from retirement. What thoughts, pearls of wisdom, and or perspective might you share for others as some of our listeners may be moving into seasons of change and similar transition? And you've got a book coming out about this, right?
Yeah, I do. It's with Princeton University Press. We don't have a title yet because everything the editor and I suggest to each other we both find boring. So, but it's on how to retire for academics.
Yes.
Since I was just going through that process, and I think for me, what has been most important is uh, being okay with who I am and what I've done, and being
Mm,
able to let go of that, to feel good about what happened, to let go of any regrets or what ifs or things I didn't have time to accomplish, and then to embrace what comes next. There's a lot of research that's showing, for example, in terms of aging as a transition, that the more you can just embrace your aging, the better your aging will be. And so, for your listeners, I have a few more wrinkles, I have some gray hairs, and I wear them as badges of honor because I earned every one of them.
yes, indeed.
And so being able to move into transitions, uh, feeling positive about whatever is going on with you, whoever you are, what's happening, uh, makes it better. And
Mm,
so I've worked hard to do that. Sometimes, as we were saying, in this particular political climate, that can be difficult on some days.
hmm.
Um, but it's really been a process of coming to terms with what that part of my life was
Hmm.
and looking forward to the next part of it.
Mm,
And one of the important pieces of that is really embracing joy. And Annie Dillard writes about joy as sort of
mm,
both a gift and a discipline.
mm,
So it's not something we can just fabricate, but we also don't just sit back and wait on it to happen, but we begin to look for it. We pay attention to the world. We notice its beauty. We notice the goodness that is in people. We notice those kindnesses and we appreciate them. And that becomes then a habit. And so we can develop the habit of living in joy. And so that's been really important for me to do.
being okay with who I am and what I've done. If you ask me, those are good words of wisdom indeed. Susan, it's been good to be with you for this episode of Voice of the Turtle. Now, you may know this, but Voice of the Turtle was the name of an LGBTQ plus newsletter produced by Baptists beginning in the early 1970s. And Voice of the Turtle's motto was, "Behold the turtle. It makes progress only when it sticks out its neck." How would you encourage folk today, and maybe even in this present time, to keep sticking out their neck?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. We have to speak up and act out. And I think about those people who came before us and the courage that they showed. I think about people sitting at lunch counters in North Carolina and having the crap beaten out of them. And I think about, within our community, the in the AIDS crisis when ACT UP was formed, because, we had a president who wouldn't even say AIDS, and nothing was being done, and people were dying. And at that point, in this country, what we were aware of is it was mostly gay men who were dying. And it was lesbians who were taking care of them. Uh,
For the record.
as always. Uh,
Amen.
but and what we didn't know at that point is actually there were a lot of women dying. It's just they were presenting with different symptoms. And that only became discovered because women began to advocate when they were showing up with these odd symptoms that weren't Kaposi's sarcoma, but it was, yeast infections, to be quite blunt. Uh, but that's what it took, was people speaking up, acting out, acting up, demanding that they be taken seriously and that they be treated as fully human beings. And I think about those, bless their hearts, those drag queens at Stonewall
Mm,
said enough. And I think we have to inherit that legacy and then live into it with our own acts of courage. And that can be quite scary. There was one time I wrote a piece for Baptist News Global, and I was addressing some issues around climate change and race and vulnerabilities and all this. Anyway, so it got picked up by Campus Reform, and their little piece got picked up by Breitbart. And the next thing I know, I'm getting the nastiest emails and phone calls I've ever gotten in my life. It was horrible. And it went on for about a week till something else distracted them and they went after somebody else. And I thought, if they think that's going to shut me up, they truly do not know me. And I
mm,
think that's got to be part of our attitude is, um, if you come after me, I will stand even stronger, and I'll
mhm.
go get more people to help me.
Well, right. Good.
And that's really what happened. And the interesting thing is it backfired, I think, a little bit for them, because while the trolling was awful, I probably had more support that week than I have had in my entire career. I had former students getting in touch. My administration in Oregon State stepped up and defended me. Um,
Hmm.
Public safety kept an eye out for me. I mean, it ended up being this incredibly affirming experience,
Mm,
but it was still awful. And so standing up in a moment like this costs something,
mhm,
and we have to be willing to take on that cost. We can't give in. We can't run and hide. We have to put something on the line, and that's just the reality of it. And I feel like we owe that because somebody did that for us. I mean, I would not be here if
mm,
it had not been for those drag queens and lesbians,
mm,
the stone butches and all
mm,
of that part of our history. And so I owe it to that legacy to do my part so that hopefully this next generation has an easier time than I did, because it was still a struggle in the, 80s and 90s trying to do this. And so I think we've just got to stay engaged. And sometimes the fight may be all we have. We may not see the end result of it,
mhm.
but I think it's an act of faith to continue to be activists and to do the right thing to make change for others if we may not see it ourselves.
Yeah. Well, AWAB, Susan, is grateful for you and for the ways our paths have crossed and may cross yet some more. You have, and I know you will continue to stick out your neck for so many. And for this, we are better off. And with your witness and testimony, we will continue to do together what none of us can do on our own, so that we perhaps ourselves may be the shoulders upon which others after us may stand, even as we stand on those that have gone before us. So thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
please plan to join us for the final episode of Season 1 of Voice of the Turtle, when we visit with the Reverend Dr. Brandon Crowley, Senior Pastor of the historic Myrtle Baptist Church, and like Dr. Shaw, a previous AWAB annual lecture speaker. That's all the dirt for this episode of Digging into the Past while Facing the Present, Season 1 of the podcast from the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists, AWAB. The podcast is produced by our friends at Good Faith Media. Learn more at goodfaithmedia.org. Our music comes from Pond 5. This AWAB podcast is made possible by a generous grant from American Baptist Home Mission Societies and from Knollwood Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. You can learn more about us, AWAB, at awab.org. You can tap more of our free resources, including a list of fully welcoming and affirming Baptist-aligned churches in the United States and elsewhere. That's awab.org. Reach out. You can support us, and we can support you. Check out the show notes for more information. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give us a like and rating, and tell your friends about it. If you find yourself needing immediate support and someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Call or text 988. I'm Brian Henderson. Stay encouraged. Remember, you are not alone.